welcome to Gem Friends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson Passey from Carolina Girl Genealogy. And as always, we have got an awesome panel and an awesome guest. First, I want to welcome Melissa Barker, our archive lady, for being with us tonight. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
So good to have you. We have Laura Hedgecock with us from Treasure Chest of Memories. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
So good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Bernice Bennett from Jeannie B. Roots is here. Hi, Bernice.
Oh, hi.
Always good. Always good to have you. Dan Earl, family history guy, is here.
Hello.
Hi, Dan. And last but not least, for panel members, Shelley Murphy, family tree girl. Hey, Shelley.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here as well.
I'm so glad you're here. Now, we have got probably a very familiar face to anybody watching, but our special guest tonight is Amie Tennant. And Amie is going to talk to us tonight about using poll records and tax records for your genealogy to find your family. We thought that was a fitting topic as we're recording the eve of our next general election. So take it away, Amie. Tell us a little bit about what is a poll record for anybody that doesn't know.
Well, typically we would call that a poll tax or tax list.
Right.
And generally speaking, it is applicable to paying a tax to be able to vote.
Mm-hmm.
But not always. Not all poll taxes were attached to being able to vote. Sometimes they would refer to, especially in colonial America, they would call a poll tax maybe a personal property tax. So it wasn't always about voting, but late 1800s and early 1900s, it definitely became a way of discouraging African Americans and poor whites to not be able to vote. And you know, putting these heavy taxes on someone just to be able to vote really you know, shut down the whole idea of democracy. Really, it just it wasn't equal. It wasn't for everybody. And so if you didn't have the money to pay your taxes, and some of them would require that you paid taxes for several years prior to being.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it differed state to state as to how much the poll tax would be, or the property tax, or whatever they called it. And it's on a county level. So like if you were to try to find these types of records, generally you would find them on a county level, maybe in an auditor's office or the sheriff's department, because the sheriff sometimes would be the one collecting the poll tax.
Okay.
Some places it might be at the sheriff's department, but highly unlikely these days. Probably in your county auditor or maybe state archives.
Right. Historical societies, just depending on who collected them and who. I know that I found some voter registration records for South Carolina for 1868, and they have been digitized, and that's on the South Carolina the digital public library. And so that was kind of fun to go through county by county, and because you know my people are from South Carolina, so I could go back and find all these records. So that was really fun. And as a matter of fact, one person that I found, I did not know, I still don't know when he died, but now I know that he was at least alive in 1868 because he registered on that record. So it gives me another clue.
Well, it also gives you a clue as to how old he was.
Yeah, right.
Because he had to be, typically, they were between the ages of 21 and 50.
Right.
Poll tax.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so that's great information. You know, if somebody appears on that poll tax list at a certain time, you can expect that, especially a male, obviously a male at that particular time, between the ages of 21 and 50.
Exactly. You know, I knew he'd fought in the Civil War, and that's the last record I could find, and I didn't think he died in the Civil War. So obviously he didn't because he was on this record. So that was like, what? Find them, you know, person, place at a time. So they're really, really good for that. So many different places that you can find them, and you just need to look. Poll taxes and regular tax registration records. Some places you can actually find the record where they voted and everything they filled in and all that, where what I was just finding was a list.
Yeah,
Give me no other information, just a list.
Right. Generally, it's a list. One of the questions I think Shelley maybe had asked, when was the first poll tax done?
Required, yeah.
Yeah, or required. Well, the thing is, poll taxes have been around for centuries. I mean, go back to like Roman times. That's how long ago. In colonial America, or let's say British colonial America, poll taxes were being collected at that time, pretty much throughout history until about 1950s-ish.
Okay.
It was a state thing, so it depended on when your state started it, when they ended it. Generally speaking, the poll taxes would be something of the southern states. There were 11 states that really dug in hard with their poll taxes.
Tennessee was one of them.
Well, yes. Did you say Tennessee?
Tennessee.
Yep, Tennessee is. But then there were other states in the north. Pennsylvania had a poll tax. Some of the other ones I noticed, instead of calling it a poll tax, they might call it a personal property tax,
Yes.
then put towards schools, or
Yeah.
you know, something like that. So different things. Laura was asking.
I was going to say, Laura has a question. So
Yeah. So Laura, what was your question?
I was just wondering if you could give us an idea in today's money, like how arduous were these taxes for people to pay? What would
So
the
a couple-
equivalency be?
Okay, well, so I wrote down a couple because I thought it was really interesting. Let me pull this up. So for example, a poll tax could be fixed in your county, or it could be adjustable. So it would be based on how many acres you had, how many horses, how many men. I mean, all these different things could be adjusted how much you pay. But for example, at one point in time in Virginia, there was a fixed poll tax, and it was $1.50. So everybody paid the same. That would be roughly a day's wages. So that it's pretty significant. And then I saw that North Carolina, in 1919, they had something in their state statutes that said poll taxes cannot exceed 90 cents.
Oh.
So it could be anything up between that. And what would happen is that your tax adjusters on your county level would determine what was going to be taxed and how much, you know, per thing. Gold watch is worth this much, this much, a stud horse, this much, blah, 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 blah. So, but it was not to exceed 90 cents.
So it just depended on the state, the time period, and
Yeah.
and probably what the poll tax was being used for, if there was an underlying current, as there was, you know, after the Civil War. There was a purpose in those poll taxes, and a lot of it was to stop, and we kind of talked about this when we first came on, but to stop people from voting, you know, prevent them from voting. And that happened a lot, especially in the South. So if you could tell somebody that they couldn't vote unless they paid their taxes, well, then you could control who could vote and who couldn't vote. And so that was a big deal. Bernice, you have got some really cool records that you wanted to share. Do you want to go ahead and share your screen and tell us about what you've been able to find?
Okay. Can you see that?
I can.
Okay. This is a taxable poll list. And this list is for Edgefield, South Carolina, August 4th, 1892. Now, I know you can't read it, but it was in the newspaper and it was found on Chronicling America. The list is divided into white at the top and colored. Now, on this list, and this is the statement that's in the newspaper about taxable toll lists, in accordance with an act of the General Assembly approved December 22nd, 1891, they published the names of the taxable polls in several school districts. On this particular list, I found my ancestors. This is my great-grandfather, Richard Kemp. This is his Uncle Kane. This is his Uncle Lawrence. This is my great-uncle Boston. This is my great-grandfather, John Alexander, and another kinfolk. But the important thing for me was that I found them on this list, and it was in several sources. One source was in the Quell, which is the newsletter for the Old Edgefield District Genealogy Society. And that's an excellent place to find information. The other was a publication, and I don't know if you can see it really good. And it was newspaper articles from Edgefield Advertiser, Edgefield Chronicle, the Weekly Monitor in South Carolina relating to African Americans. And Samira Thurman went through all of the newspapers. You can see how thick this book is.
Wow.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's absolutely wonderful, but that list was also published in this book. So we have several different opportunities to find our ancestors paying taxes, and this is one of them.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's so cool. I love it when we can show people what the records actually look like, instead of just talking about, oh, you know, go do this and you can find the records. So thank you so much for doing that. Now, Melissa, I know that you said you wanted to show some records.
Yeah, Amie was mentioning archives, and of course I work in a county archive, and so we have the poll tax. It actually was collected by our trustee, just like Bernice was showing, mentioned a trustee. And then she was talking about Tennessee, we were still collecting the poll tax into the 1970s.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to show is a couple of receipts. These are actual receipts, and as you can see over here, this is the tax that they pay: the state tax, county tax, school tax, highway tax, poorhouse tax, and poll tax of $2.
Wow. $18.99.
Yeah, and this is actually a colored man, James West. This is an African American.
I see the C.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Where
was
do you
my
see the
question.
C?
Right
here,
after West,
right here.
in parentheses.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
And I know that he is African American because of living in the county where I work. Yeah. And so I'm going to share one more. I don't know way to do this way.
Why do you think they had poor whites? I mean, we know of African Americans having to do that when this is I almost want to say like a general tax, not like the voter thing, but they included poor whites when she said that in the beginning. You know, she said poor whites and African Americans. I'm trying to figure out what was the thinking of that time when they're pushing this, you know, to happen. And I know we're talking about money and it's funding education or something, you know, but why would they go for?
Well,
So,
I don't know.
go ahead, Amie.
Well, I found it really interesting in Virginia in particular, where my aunts were from, back down in the holler.
That's where I'm struggling, is Virginia.
Yeah. So now, granted, I do have an African-American line. So my mother's line is African-American. And so I sometimes find them on any sort of poll tax list because they couldn't pay the poll tax. But even someone as recent as my grandfather or my great-grandfather who did pass as white, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, and they were so poor. I mean, so poor that the idea of paying a tax to be able to vote is just unheard of.
Right.
I don't think necessarily that the laws were put in place to deter white voters. I think its purpose was African Americans.
Right, right.
But I think it accidentally, if you want to say that, impacted the very poor white as well. Does that make sense?
Well, traditionally, the very poor whites were also illiterate. And
Yeah.
I think
Right.
that the leaders of the time felt like that if you were illiterate or very poor, that you were not intelligent and that you didn't really have the intelligence to vote anyway.
Right.
And so
Right.
I think that came into play.
Well, and I
Yes.
think of the Freedmen Bureau records, the refugees are white, which is poor white.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Right.
got the freedmen, you know, and then the people with abandoned lands. And again, what's the target after who they know don't have the money,
Yeah.
which means they can exclude them
Exactly.
and not have to worry about their voice and their
Right.
part being in there.
Now,
because they did
I
bad.
Now,
think-
wasn't there a period back in Britain where, or maybe even colonial America, when voting was only done by landholders?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
general, at very general. You had to be landholder,
Yeah.
21 years of age.
Yeah.
That, yeah, was the general gist of it. But you
Yeah.
know what? I wanted to say something because Shelley, you said something that I remembered. Now I've probably drawn a complete blank.
Sorry.
What did you just say?
I was talking
Um,
about the Freedmen Bureau records and the refugees being poor whites.
Right. Oh, right. Okay, so they a lot of the. Okay, let me see if I can remember this correctly. When the Civil War was over, and that was 1865. Come 1866-ish, we've got lots of new free blacks voting
Mm-hmm.
into U.S. Congress positions.
Right.
Then come 1867, they pass, I believe that was the 14th. Yes, and the new Reconstruction Act
Mm-hmm.
and all that in 67. And so that's when all these blacks started voting. And then sure enough, the South was like, oh, no.
Exactly.
What are we going to do about that? And that's when these
Yeah, that's right, Shelley. The money. Let's stop them with the
Right.
money. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and the black codes came up.
Mm-hmm.
And also among those was this whole literacy thing, right? The reading
Right.
and the writing. Well, they had exemptions, and whites, even though they were really poor, could sometimes get away with being able to vote without having to pay a tax.
Ah,
Oh, I got
that sounds just like something in Virginia.
I gotcha.
Yes.
So Dan, you had a calculation about the money and
Yeah.
what it would be for today?
Yeah, so if you go to a website called Wolfram Alpha,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
it's
Oh, yeah.
the computational knowledge engine.
Yeah.
And if you just, so what I did is I looked at the total that Melissa had on the screen and put in, whatever, $4.18 and $18.99 today. And he paid $134.71 in taxes that year, which we're not going to make any political comments on that. But then the poll tax translated, the $2 poll tax would be $64.45 in today's money.
Oh,
That is really high.
that is
right.
high. That's a
And-
lot of money.
And to
That's a
think
lot
that
of
like my
money.
wife and I were just able to fill out ballots here at home, and then all it cost us was maybe a few cents in gas to drive it down to the
Mhm.
township office and drop it off.
Right.
Nobody had to question us or do anything like that. We didn't have to pay
Right.
anything. So
Right.
so
And-
we sometimes see these small amounts from long ago. We're like, oh well, $2. Like who cares? Like I give my
Yeah.
kid more than $2. Like
Yeah.
there's $2 and change in the couch.
Right.
That's $64. Like
That's a day's wages. Just
yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That 134 for the one that Melissa put up, my personal property tax that's due by December 30th is 199. Look at the time frame, and I'm at 199.
Mhm.
And again, I know some of that comes with how many cars you have and all that
Sure.
stuff. Where I had two, it used to be more. Now I just have one. But still, 199, and we're talking back here. What was your date range on yours, Melissa?
It was 1899.
1899. Wow.
Well, what are,
The poll tax
Go
can
ahead.
tell us so much.
that's what I was
And I'm
going
so
to
glad that Amy's here to talk to us
Money.
about it, because
Yeah.
I can tell you my husband's third great grandfather was a sharecropper. He never owned a piece of property in his life. He surely, and he was very, they had to be very poor. But he paid his poll tax every single year, which tells me voting for him was extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, and these, and I don't know about everywhere, and Amie might could tell us about this, but the poll tax here is included in your property tax. And so that's why I always tell genealogists when I teach about this, because I have a whole presentation on voting and election and things, is just because your ancestors didn't own any property, you still need to look at the tax records because of the poll tax.
Right.
Right. Well, I found in my African American line, there again in Virginia, and I just found this record like 2 days ago.
Ah.
My fifth grade
Welcome to the family.
We might be.
No, what county in Virginia, though? What county in Virginia?
Lee County.
Oh, girl, that's the way out. That's the one that closes the door on Virginia. I know that. Yeah,
I'm
they're
right there. Yes, all those little where you
Little
can stand in
curve.
one place and touch 3 states. That's
it. That's Lee
That's
County.
it.
They're hitting Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Yeah.
well. So he had nothing, but he had 2 boys over the age of 16.
16.
So he had to pay a different amount on them than a white person. At least it looked like it. I need to do a little bit more digging on that because it seemed like he paid more than what his white neighbors were paying.
Right.
So I need to double check on that. But I thought, there again, there's another deterrent. Heaven forbid, have more kids.
And they were over 16, but what was the law? Over 21, I thought.
No, he was over 21.
Okay.
My grandfather, but he had children, boys that were over the age of 16, and so they
charged him higher.
tax on them.
Interesting.
Or paid more if they had.
I need to go find
certain
poll
age.
tax records.
Yeah. There's so many things that we can learn from them, and that's why Melissa hit on that a little bit. But what are some of the things that we can learn from finding these poll tax records? Why do we need to look for them? I know sometimes people say, I've got the birth, death, marriage.
Well,
why do I need to
always
continue
come
finding
in.
anything else?
Yeah,
ahead,
but
Shelley.
time and place always
Let's
come
say
in.
first and foremost, it's location. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
your ancestors in
Yeah.
a time and place.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, which I can't remember. I know, I believe it's Ohio and maybe Tennessee, Kentucky, or Virginia. One of those 3 is missing one of their 1800, 1810 censuses.
Tennessee.
Tennessee
Tennessee does not
Yeah.
have its 1800 or 1810.
Okay, and Ohio has no 1810.
Mm-mm.
So what happens is if you lose your family between that time
Mhm.
and they're not buying
Yes.
or selling land, your next best guess
That's right.
Might be.
find where they are
Yeah.
those personal property taxes, poll tax lists. That's how you find them.
Great
And
idea.
Right.
year by year, you can, see where they are. So
Exactly. And sometimes they're missing out of one and then they're back again. So were they doing something else, or did something happen in the community where they couldn't pay taxes that year? So that's something that you can start looking into. So it helps to build their story as well. Helps to see if a whole group of people is suddenly gone. Did they all
Right.
go somewhere? Did the whole family leave with the neighbors? And speaking of neighbors, it helps you understand who the neighborhood is, who was around them. So you can start researching those people too to help you come up with more information. So,
Well, I know that in Tennessee, the way that the tax records are put together they're put together within the county, they're put together by district.
mhm.
Then within that district, I mean, you talk about neighbors, you can take that district and you can dissect it
Exactly.
and look at if your ancestor paid the poll tax or even on property and paid other taxes.
Mhm.
You can see who all the neighbors were, because sometimes on a census record they didn't go house to house like this and they come this way and go down that way. They may went back and forth or who knows what. But tax records are a real help with that, especially if you're having to do that research on the friends and neighbors, because you're trying to find information that you can't find just on researching that ancestor straightforward.
Mm-hmm. You know,
Yeah,
and besides,
and
go ahead, Laura, I'm sorry.
well, I think Melissa gave us a great example too. If you are lucky enough to find an actual record instead of a list, I mean, that's beautiful context. Just
Yeah.
to kind of look at that and see the original, and even the calculation that Dan did. I mean, that's great context for the stories that you're going to tell.
Definitely.
You know, I was able to also use them as part of your preponderance of evidence, a father-child relationship. If you've got this man that's been paying taxes, and then all of a sudden another man shows up who's
Same last name.
taxes, but right beside him, it might be one of his
Yes.
kids.
Like Bernice's list.
Exactly.
You saw
like
a family with the
Right.
surname. Yeah.
Right. And especially if you can follow the father and he's having to pay taxes on his boys who are over 16, you can count up 5 years and say, okay, that boy is 21, and then a new person shows up.
Exactly. You
I
know,
don't understand I don't understand the paying tax on your children if they're boys.
Purely
it's just money. They're just trying to get money out of them.
Money.
Because if you couldn't pay that money, then you couldn't vote. So.
Right. And it was different in different places. That's the thing too, Laura. And so, you know, I don't know if they were charging. One of the things I found, it was very difficult to find information on a state statute book, like Google Books or something.
Those are really hard to find.
Yeah.
Google
I
Books
can tell you, I can tell you that Tennessee has all of their Tennessee acts online.
Yeah.
South Carolina
Ohio definitely doesn't. I even talked to the state archives and they said it's very hard to go back to like 1916 and figure out what the statute was on this, that, or the other.
What state, Laura?
Ohio. I was looking for the requirement.
Oh, that's not true.
I
think you can get them all online. You just got to go to the right location. I do.
Did you go to
Google? I really worked on it. I was trying to find why someone would go to cross, I think it was 1916, cross over into Cincinnati to get married from Ohio.
Probably just
so I wanted to look, I figured it was some kind of consent or some kind, and but I wanted to find the statute and I couldn't find the actual statute.
My grandma and grandpa did that. And they went over to Greenup, Kentucky. You have to get a blood test and you didn't have to wait.
That's what I was wondering too. Blood test or waiting or consent from a parent, but she was over 18.
So you were looking for an actual statute. You pretty much figured out why they did it, but you wanted the legal reason.
So that would have been state. So I would have went right to the state for that and not the Google Books.
No,
I use Google Books all the time.
Yeah, they're there too. They're there.
Google Books, but if I'm looking, you called the state?
I called the state archives and they hooked me up with a reference librarian. And she could not find it.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about to the state legislative place where the statute stuff. Help me out there, Melissa.
Yeah, in Tennessee, it's on the Secretary of State website.
Oh, there
they
you
have
go.
They have a link to all of our private. They're called private acts, which are the laws as to why we do
all that
why
stuff
we
is
do what
online,
we do.
I bet.
And do they have historical ones as well, Melissa? Because I think Michigan has current, but I don't think we have historical statutes.
These go all the way back to 1796 when the state of Tennessee.
That's cool.
That's
cool.
great.
I go to the body that would have issued the statute. And again, I use Google Books. I found a lawsuit
that's great.
And figured out a relative, the first child was illegitimate. I just shared this with Bernice. Researched this man for 20-some years, the whole family. That was one of the homesteads. We all went up there every summer, living in Michigan. We go up here and this is us 5 kids from the city, of course, had to work on the farm all summer. First, it doesn't matter, but his first child was illegitimate according to the lawsuit. And I thought, oh my God. And we've been, you know, and my mother, who's 90 years old, it was so funny. Like I said, I just shared this with Bernice because she made a comment. She said, you know, my mother said that Pearl, and again, family person, Pearl said something about that Joe Davis didn't look like the other Davis boys. and that her mother said, oh, hush, Pearl. Oh, hush, Pearl. Don't get it started.
That's too
And
funny.
again, and here I'm finding out the record, and the first thing it says, the first child illegitimate, Joe Davis, born 1838.
Oh,
Franklin,
that's hysterically
Chambersburg.
funny.
It
Yes,
was
so funny.
hilarious. And I thought, oh my God, family.
Okay. All right. So we have determined what
Yeah.
taxes are.
Time and place was first one. What's the other
We've
stuff?
we've determined what a poll tax is, but we can also find actual voting records as well. It's not just those poll taxes that are out there. We can actually find where our ancestors went and registered to vote. And I was telling you about that 1868 one I found for the state of South Carolina, and it was labeled by county. It was labeled alphabetical order. They had black, white, or colored white in the listings. So there are places where we can actually go and find. So that was really cool to go through and see, you know, the different names of my ancestors that they had registered to vote. I would like to see if they've got, you know, did they have to fill anything out besides just sign their name? Surely they would have had to, but I don't know if they had to fill out anything so I could get some more information on them. But, you know, that's more digging into historical societies and archives. Melissa, do you have actual records, not just books with, you know, ledgers with lists? Do you have actual?
No, I have actual records. We have, we were very fortunate that a lot of things were saved for our county, which is fantastic. But we have election records. We have these records where when you can, you know, today it's different, but you used to have to go in and you have to sign the registry to go to vote. And we have those dating back to the early, like 1920.
Wow.
And so we have those. And we have another thing too that I always teach genealogists is not only looking for your ancestors that voted, but what if your ancestors worked the polls? I have records for poll. I have records for poll workers where they got paid, and what precinct they worked in, and things like that.
That's so cool. Yeah. And I think, you know, as we're going into archives and historical societies, genealogy societies that have records, we don't think about those kind of things. We are so busy thinking about, we want, you know, marriage records, birth records, death records, cemetery records, that we forget that there's so many different things that our ancestors did that would have created records that would tell us something about them. So I'm so jealous that you've got those.
Well, you know, when you're going into a place, talk to the archivist, talk to the librarian, talk to the museum curator, wherever you're at. You know, and I know it's difficult because sometimes, like you said, we don't think about certain record types. But hopefully, if whoever you are watching this program, write it down. Write down voting records and poll tax records. So the next time you're emailing or phone calling or visiting any of these places, ask about these records, and then they'll say, oh yeah, well, we've got these records, you know. But sometimes an archivist may not offer. It's not because they don't want to, it's because they're not sure what you're looking for. They have so many different kinds of records, you know, and so if you can ask, then it will say, oh well, yeah, we've got these records.
You know, to Cheri, the registration, the voter registration records, almost all the time, the person registering had to give their birth date because
Or
you
age,
have to be a certain age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that record can be very beneficial if you are lacking a birth certificate.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
As a substitute record. Maybe not the greatest one if they wanted to lie about how they were.
True, because, you know, if you had to be a certain age, you might just go and say, oh yeah, I'm old enough to vote.
But, you know, if you don't have that birth certificate, birth record, or, you know, then that's a good option.
Exactly. So many fun records that we have out there. Dan, would you like to?
I don't know what you guys are talking about. Our ancestors, now your ancestors might have been a bunch of liars and horse thieves, but mine always told the truth on
Yeah.
every
always
government
lie,
record.
Okay?
They never lied on anything except when they did. So
Except when they, yeah.
Except for when they did. Oh, that's hysterically funny. And we always need to look at our records like that too. We need to look at them and think to ourselves, is there any reason somebody may not have necessarily told the truth when they were filling out this record? So, because we would never do that today. No, they'd come back and get us today. They could prove that we were not telling the truth. But back then there wasn't anybody who was going to come back and say, oh, you're not 21, you're not old enough to do this or whatever. So does anybody else have any, Amie, do you have any other last things that you would like to tell us about these records?
Well, I was going to answer Shelley's question from a little while ago. She asked about where to find.
Yes.
I got 2 questions.
Okay.
Okay. So she's absolutely right. I mean, FamilySearch is the perfect go-to place.
Exactly.
And then of course, Ancestry has numerous ones. But I think you will likely find what you're looking for at a state or county archives, or even a local public library where the records have at least been published in form.
Yeah.
So, and then of course it's your county courthouse, possibly there as well. So that's where you would find those types of records.
Okay, and the other thing, just to follow up and close it out or whatever, I saw, and again, I'm speaking to the newbies out there. I saw Melissa show a receipt, right? And I saw Bernice with the list. So was it required to have a receipt? Because I know someone said something about if there was any prep work prior to either the list or whatever. So when they went to go vote, did they have to have that receipt? So So the chances of finding the receipt might be the challenge more than finding the list, or both?
Well, you had to have the receipt.
Okay.
To vote. However, you could, if you lost it, you could get a duplicate, but you would have to go through the courts. You'd have to have an affidavit made.
Okay.
But that's cool, because that's a good record, right? So you want them to lose it and have to go through the courts.
Yeah.
It gives you more information about them.
Cheri, you can't be wishing this stuff on your ancestors.
Well, yes, you can, because it creates records. It helps us. It was probably a pain for them, but it ends up helping us. So poor little ancestor, you had to spend an extra 2 days, but look at all the good information you left for us. So and it's a win-win.
And we know at least every year or every other year you have to vote. You know what I'm saying? Something locally, if you look, it's either every year or every 2 years, possibly, maybe 4 years. But look, that's another thing for people to understand is what was their voting era? When did that county have their local votes?
Exactly.
To know when those records are too. So.
Well, and Bernice was showing what she found in the newspaper, and the newspaper is also a really good resource for figuring out what was going on in that community, who was running for what their platforms were, and they'd put little articles in the paper, and there'd be columns where people would be arguing, almost like today. You'd have all of that going on still, but it would all be put in the newspaper, letters to the editor and all that kind of stuff. So you can get a sense of what was going on in your ancestors' head. Yes, Laura.
So my husband has ancestors in Nebraska, and one of his great uncles had a car dealership, and the newspaper even went over who took a ride in the new Cadillac. It was just minutia of what went on, and who took a train ride. Everything. So everything was in that newspaper.
Right. So, political conventions may have come to your ancestors' town. Sometimes they had lists. I've seen lists of who attended them, because we think we've got no privacy today, but They had absolutely
didn't.
no privacy back then. They
None.
couldn't take a walk down the street without somebody putting it in the paper.
Well, I wanted
So,
to add to what Amy said
yeah.
about where to find these records for
Yep.
Shelley, because I know Shelley does Tennessee research, and that's what I do too. But the majority of Tennessee counties on FamilySearch, if they have digitized the microfilm records, their tax records are on FamilySearch. You have to go to the catalog, you have to go that route. But the poll taxes are listed in there, and then if they have the digitized books, and the way that they look is that you have the taxes and name, and then the taxes come across, and at the very end, normally it shows where they made the notation, where they paid it, and the date.
Oh, great.
And
That's
so, but the
wonderful.
majority of Tennessee counties have those records on FamilySearch.
Good. Cool. Bernice, you said you've got something else you'd like to add?
I just want to say two things. First of all, you should look for in the newspaper the appointment of your ancestor to a juror.
Yes.
They had to be a taxpayer in order to get that appointment.
Yes.
That's right.
Other is to look at congressional investigations regarding voter registration and complaints, because that's where you'll find a listing of people who actually go and testify how they were intimidated and
Oh, like the Freedmen
Oh,
Bureau.
not to vote. But remember, this information is available, and it's another resource to look at.
Absolutely.
That's so true, Bernice. And also Amy was talking about Google Books. She's brought up Google Books a lot, and I use it a lot. That is actually how I found out one of my husband's ancestors. It was his third great grandfather, Jesse Glasgow, actually ran for office. I did not know this. And how it came to be was I was searching for his name in Google Books, and I found this from the state level where they had done an investigation, just like Bernice said. And there was conflict. There was a argument over who won the particular election in this county where he lived, and so it had nothing to do with him. However, each of the precincts had to record or report what the voting tally was. And he got my husband's ancestor got 4 votes. So it was recorded in this investigation because of what they were looking for, but it had nothing to do with him. But that's how I found out he ran for, I think it was like state senator or something. It was the election just after the Civil War.
Huh.
Wow.
You just never know. You just never know. We've got to just get in there and dig into everything. You never know what you're going to find in a group of records. So that's why archives and libraries and historical societies, those places, as Shelley's always talking about, location, location, location. We've got to get our boots on the ground. We've got to get these places open so we can go back to researching.
Yeah. Our boots have nowhere to go.
I know. Our boots are stuck in the closet.
Send them an email. Send them an email.
Exactly.
A lot of our archives, I've said it over and over, a lot of our archives may not be open to the public, but the people are there working or they're working from home, and they are still watching that email.
Yeah.
So let's encourage everybody who's watching this, write to your local archives. Ask them if they've got poll tax records. Ask them if they've got voting records and what they have, the time periods that they have, and if they're willing to do some lookups for you and find. Now, you can't just say, will you find everything on my family? You can't do that. You have to give them some.
Well, you can, but it's not a good idea.
It's not a good idea, and you probably won't get an answer. But what you need to do is tell them what you're looking for and who and time periods and locations to see if they can find anything for you. And I know a lot of archivists, look at our great Melissa here, they're welcoming those kind of things. They want to help you find those records. So I challenge everybody who's watching this to do it and then come back and tell us what you found. Leave us a little note either on our YouTube page or on the blog post. Tell us what you found. We would be thrilled to hear that you watched this and got excited and were inspired and went and found some records. So I guess with that, unless anybody else has something to say, we will wrap this up. And I thank everybody for being here, especially you, Amy. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
And your knowledge, and it was just perfect timing. And everybody said, go out and vote. It's that time of year. If you haven't done so yet, go vote. Our ancestors,
I voted already.
our ancestors fought for it, and let's get out there and make them proud and do our civic duty. So with that, we will say bye for now, and we will see you next time on Gen Friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.